Blessed love and peace. Um, so, in a recent joint, if I recall correctly, the most recent joint, I'm falling half asleep. Now I'm half asleep, falling asleep half the time, all the time, sometime, whatever. And I begin addressing some very solemn topics and progressions and whatever else, half asleep. So I'm recording this now in la madrugada, always pronouncing that right. Why? Because madrugada has the name inadvertently of God in that. So we have to be careful of the pronunciation for the English speakers and the speaking. So that's why there's the somewhat of the adjusted pronunciation, and then that just fumbles often the entire word itself. So madrugada, good. Anyways, 10 to 2. 10 to 2. I tend to 2. I tend to 2. Um, why am I up? Because about 2 hours ago, kinfolk were just yelling at the top of their lungs, sounding about to kill each other. Sound like domestic situation, which police are aware that's one of the most dangerous calls to get, interceding between kinfolk who are out of their minds. Now, these days, out of the minds can just mean, yo, cause some disturbance and make it loud for 5 minutes, but don't get caught up. So it just it's unreal. It's unreal. Um, so one way or another, cats is increasingly gone. Um, it's the conditions. Um, it's not the decay what that we're observing at this moment. It's like the demolition. Um, how much of it is what's it called? Not orchestrated demolition or whatever, um, and how much of it is just de facto, difficult to discern, and that's part of the nature too. So, anyways, going back on the notion, the topic of being black, not being black, and all that. Um, then also the United States, and particularly the United States being dead at this moment. And then looking for something positive to share for balance and guidance and upliftment. So, on the topic of black, um, this is just the progression of conditions at this moment, because there's an absence of leadership in the black community. There's an absence of credible authority, and in that absence, in that void, it's just cats kicking up dust and loudmouths, just like doing whatever. Not just loudmouths, but like slaves who are subsidized to do divide and conquer type ignorant, ignorant, ignorance, and again, without like credible authority, without like credible leadership, to say, okay, this is what they're doing. There's an absence of credible leadership, just categorically, for a long time, to like just like to quiet some things up, to focus on some things, and otherwise, the athletes are not it, the musicians are not it, the activists are not it, the professionals are not it. So, anyways, rather than harping on that, point is that when something like this happens, when kinfolk get on this trend of divisiveness, black versus mixed and otherwise, and it's fueled by the power structure to do the divide and conquer thing, and particularly amongst young people who have less of an idea of knowing what kinfolk are talking about, or acknowledging like what they're doing. That's the important thing, like consequences of what's going on, not just to others but to themselves. When like speaking directly and indirectly, irreverently, disrespectfully towards ancestors. That's one's own ancestors. So all of that gatekeeping, false gatekeeping, and everything else like that, it's like it deteriorates the entirety. And meanwhile, all right. First, plain and simple, I love all kinfolk. I love all black folk. strong track record of service to the community for further years than most cats have been alive on this earth. So it's not about touting myself, though. The community speaks it, but part of the challenge is that much of the community, much of the community done lost it, attaching itself with the United States, with the pirate ship. And with the pirate ship going down, the shackles have increasing consequences, and cats got to learn how to swim. Plain and simple. One, get the shackles off, and then two, whether it's front crawl, breaststroke, side stroke, elementary backstroke, something. Cats got to learn how to swim and build ships. So that's what we on. Off the plantation, off the slave mentality, and in this experience of coming from the Middle Passage, we are inextricably linked. We have a relationship and an obligation with each other. Even with the ignorance, however, we don't have an obligation to the ignorance, and we can distance ourselves. We must distance ourselves from the ignorance, just like in the days of the formal shackles. There's cats who left the plantation and cats who didn't. There's a distancing, and that's where things are. And so, kinfolk to these days, we observe, are utilizing this identity of being black as like a club membership, without even knowing what kinfolk are talking about, and just essentially equating it to suffering or being down, and doing the false gatekeeping. And it causes static, it causes dust, and it also lets us see how kinfolk look at us. And in doing that, it becomes a situation of like, yeah, not trying to be down with the club, or whatever club that is being proclaimed. We're African. We honor our ancestors. Our ancestors progressed through the Middle Passage. That's without question. And we honor this. We continue the legacy, and we honor the enduring of our ancestors by continuing to uplift off the plantation, going back to Africa, getting out of the United States, relinquishing U.S. citizenship, recognizing that it's the plantation, learning African language, learning African culture and heritage, and further. So anyways, we love all black kinfolk, our black kinfolk, but at the same time, love is a two-way street. And when we catch and static, it's not everybody, it's not even the most people. Most kinfolk are just quietly just trying to get through what's going on right now. But at the same time, because of that, with quietness and not quieting up the dust, even though it's just a small part, and it's like amplified by the divisiveness, the divide and conquer kinfolk, it causes questions and all the types of stuff. Even, I mean, I can talk about the kinfolk who show love on the bus. I can show kinfolk who show excessive love, of like ownership, of like, no, he's one of us, he's black, da 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 da. That's appreciated, but at the same time, all my ancestors, all our ancestors. So we appreciate that, and we don't deny that. Kinfolk accept us, and additionally, we with that. But at the same time, we can't be going out and avail ourselves to being accused of falsity or whatever else, because we are on so much further priority type joints. And again, the notion of being black in and of itself and exclusively is a slave mentality and the plantation mentality. African, be African. Black is nothingness. White is nothingness. Ancestors, language, customs, tradition, heritage, leadership, teachers. That's what it is. So that's what we focus on. And if when cats want to get into the whole club membership game, have it. Peace, deuces, out. African is unquestionable, and and un um, involuntary. It's not a matter of being like not wanting. It's not. It's beyond. It's not a choice. So, all right. Anyways, so it makes just it just and here's one thing to be honest was very interesting because for the better part of this past half century that I've been alive and that I've been living on this earth, walking the roads of creation and living and breathing and studying and building with black folk, African folk, there's always been that light skin thing. I mean, in the 80s, it was light skin thing. And there was always like the inside joke that was supposed to be somewhat of like we're getting further so that we can talk about this, but at some point like there would be these light skinned singers that were just getting popular and trending or whatever, and then people would just say, "Oh, light skin is in," and then then eventually I'm talking about like Christopher Williams, I'll be sure or whatever else, up light skin is in, and then like a few years later, then the dark skinned brethren would come through. I don't know if Jodeci counts in that respect, but like Wesley Snipes and otherwise, and they just say dark is in. So that was like a lighthearted type of thing, and it helped to kind of like deal with some of the like, centuries of colorism within kinfolk of African ancestry. But at the same time, it wasn't a matter about being mixed. It wasn't a matter about being half caste or whatever else, pick me or otherwise. It was simply dark skin and light skin. And somebody could be light skinned and their parents were both of African ancestry for generations, because we know how that is. So it's a huge difference we're seeing. We're seeing this now. It's a huge difference between that kind of trope and kinfolk would be joked for being light skinned. I was joked for being light skinned. Oh, I ain't got no rhythm and oh da 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 da. But the thing is this: in doing that, it's not calling into derogation my ancestry. It's a reverse colorism that's with a light heart, and ultimately acceptance within the fold. When I'm in at a predominant high school with predominantly people of your African ancestry, when I go to an HBC, when I join a black fraternity, when I'm part of Black Law Student Association in law school, Black MBA Association when I'm in business school, continually. It's just, okay, part of the fold, no question about it. Don't have to talk about being mixed at all. Didn't. I was under the radar. I'm not outing myself in that respect because that's how the culture is. But at the same time, because of that, it's never directly denounced mixed, ba ba ba. Not like us, ba ba ba. There we go. So now that that's the conversation, and now that that's like a dividing line, it's not just a matter about being light skinned or whatever else, and it's not me or other kinfolk initiating the challenge or whatever else. It's others who are assuming that role and initiating that and conflagrating that. So because of that, that does directly call into question our ancestors. I'm grilled by elders in the black militant community who are vetting me and see if what I'm about and everything, starting to talk about my parents in addition, and that's not African. I'm talking disrespectfully about my parents as a way of questioning me, like what I'm about and everything else. Can I be trusted? Can you be trusted, citizen? So that again, and it's the false measurements of not knowing what's going on or not acknowledging at least what's going on and what the priorities are. Because when kinfolk are citizens of the United States, when kinfolk have bank accounts and have whips, riding whips and wearing fancy clothes and everything else like that, that's all slavery. And so that's not the standard of upliftment and liberation Africanness. It's all plantation chains. And so for kinfolk to be rocking these things and then calling anybody out, there's lots of mixed kinfolk who are sellouts and betrayals. And additionally, that's across the board. But there are a lot of mixed kinfolk who are extremely genuine and loyal and pained by the disrespect and the disassociation and the dismissiveness and the ignorance. So and again, what we recognize is that the ship is sinking, and the leadership of the ship, the conventional authority, and additionally, is desperate. And so when When NASA desperate, then we's desperate, and that's what it comes to. It just becomes down to like taking shots at whoever can, throwing anybody under the bus that's readily available. And so when that's the case, and the thing is again, like on one hand, can folks say, "Oh, they not black, they not black, they not black, they whatever." And then when somebody says they're not black, oh, they think they better than black. Da, 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 da. It's like you want it both ways. But what it actually is you just want mixed people to be slaves to black folk and continue to be apologetic and acquiescent and emasculated and subordinate to black folk and always prove being down and being loyal and everything else like that. Oftentimes by selling out one's European relatives and providing money and paying for this or doing whatever else. So, like, peace. Now, in that situation, again, we love all black folk. And I'm not speaking we, I'm talking about Asana Ashram, I'm talking about Asanga Yosef, Rastafari. We can talk about Rastafari too, but Rastafari is a distinct because it has a spiritual consciousness. And yes, there's colorism and xenophobia in Rastafari as well. But there's also a predominant culture and acknowledgement of higher being further too. So, and kinfolk can utilize, exercise the personal prejudice, and then find other things at fault with at least my presentation of Rastafari liberty and faith by saying, oh, he doesn't say Haile Selassie, His Majesty enough, or he doesn't say Rastafari enough, or Jah Rastafari enough, or he doesn't do this, that, and the other. But at the same time, kinfolk know what the culture of Rastafari is. And that there's an absence of an exclusive doctrine concerning Rastafari. Well, I have to be careful about that, but there are many ways of being Rastafari that are legitimate. There are a number of requirements in being Rastafari, but a lot of those criticisms are either exaggerated or just comparatively irrelevant and non-priority, but utilized just as a cause of dispersion, caste dispersion, because kinfolk just have different prejudices. So not hating on Rastafari, that's a different conversation, but just addressing that because it's part of the experience of being black and what's involved in terms of distancing from imperialism, and that including the whole race bait conversation about black versus mixed. So now in this, however people look at the separation, whatever. If kinfolk, whenever kinfolk call me black, beautiful, cool, what's up, what's happening? Kinfolk say not black, peace, blessings, whatever. But to be honest, like even just how I'm seeing kinfolk, just in the past few days of like walking with this awareness, it's interesting because it's a matter of perceiving African kinfolk as different from myself. Like I'm a different kind of race, literally. Like I'm an Indian or like Afghani. Like it's not necessarily immediate and categorical hostility or animosity, but it's just like a differentiation. And still we can love, but loving from a difference, and that's interesting. But at the same time, in many ways, in certain ways, sadly enough, it's necessary because there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of hurt that hates, and at some point we gotta distance ourselves from that hurt that hates, because it's been like that. We know there's been like that. When I can ask him for how they define black love, and the first thing people say is betrayal. We know that's pain, and we know that's like serious, and we know it needs healing. It needs that kind of support, and additionally, but at the same time, it needs not coddling, and what's the other thing? Enabling accordingly. And when cats have their mind set on being on the plantation, that's like, yo, that's your decision, or that's one's decision. I wanted to use a second person on this joint. but like we can't hold on to that kind of can't to the shackles. So not greater than or less than, but this is what is necessary. So in that process, kinfolk be like, okay, you don't not black, don't claim anything black. That's not how it works, kinfolk. We gonna have some joint custody on this joint, because that's the nature of it. So our culture, our leaders, our history, our books, our music, and additionally, it's collective. No, ain't nobody one kinfolk own it or one collective. And even when kinfolk are 100% black, and additionally, that doesn't give somebody absolute ownership of the culture. The authority within the culture is living and continuing the culture, building from and with the culture. That's the authority. And kinfolk, no one kinfolk has the gate keys for that. So, in this, however we situate ourselves, whatever, we're gonna have to like find this balance of joint custody, and like kinfolk can continue on with their black culture or whatever else. And I mean, this is the irony. This is exactly like what it is. I mean, O'Shea Jackson, some 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, Death Certificate, classic album, probably the best album for O'Shea Jackson. Track called Us. Sometimes I believe the hype man. We messing up ourselves and blame the white man. Now we know that there's racism and whatever else, but at the same time, there's nobody to blame but us. We'll always sing the blues, cause all we care about is hairstyles and tennis shoes. You step on mine, you push a button. We have to take responsibility, and for cats who aren't willing to take that responsibility, we have to take some distance. So, and there are cats who are on it. There are cats who are Afrocentric. There are cats who are repatriating to Africa. There are cats who are building village. There are cats still here in the United States. Even cats who are still citizens and are working and striving and toiling for upliftment, to find solutions, and to build further. Who have a knowledge of self, who have a love of self. They're kinfolk who have different. Well, all right. So, but at the same time, the vast majority of those kinfolk who have this mindset that I just mentioned in terms of repatriation and building village and studying, and additionally also readily recognize and honor African heritage. And in doing that, also recognize the fallacy of denying anybody else their African heritage, or questioning their African heritage, or scrutinizing their African heritage. For those who truly love themselves, work to build around everybody else. Easier said than done. Kinfolk can call me out about what happened just this past week or better. Were you building this and the other? Actually, yes. We can call it tough love, and teaching how to respond when cats is acting ignorant and sniffing around like hyenas, looking for some food, some victims to eat up. So it's teaching. Now, again, I already said it's not the best look, but it's still legit. So, all right, that's some of the consideration with black. So, we back to being mixed, and mixed like a different identity or a different ethnicity, like I said, Indian or Afghani or Mayan or otherwise, Tibetan. And so our relationship with African well, not with African folk, because that's continual, that's constant, but our relationship with black kinfolk is along those lines. It doesn't have to be hostility, but again, not trying to claim black kinfolk, not trying to claim ownership on us, and also not hating and being disrespectful towards us. Like kinfolk each stay in each one's own lane, and there it is. So one thing to say is also, it's interesting because again, just walking in the streets, the whole vibration is different, because go pushing 50 years, the 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 given, particularly in the United States, is okay. He's black. He might have backup because he's black. Who might his backup be? Him being black, quote unquote, light skinned or whatever. He might know some people of European ancestry, so got to be careful about that. But I mean, in this society, in this culture, everybody's running game on everybody else somehow, some way, trying to get over on others. That's what the purpose of the boxes are, to see who that person is, who might be their support, what they might have that we want, and otherwise. So it's all like casing other people. The boxes are cases. How about that? The boxes are cases. So as a person who's perceived as black, I'm not saying anything because this is all very much tacit communication that's had without anything being said. When people are making those assertions, making those judgment calls, there's often just again that presumption. Okay, he's of African ancestry. He's black. He might be connected with whatever black machinery exists, and so people might have a frame of reference about that. And what can they do? What can't they do? Is it still worth it? Whatever else. Same thing for every other ethnicity, whether it's European, white, Asian, or otherwise. They might have backup. So now, when it's mixed, generally speaking, historically speaking, people just say, "Oh, he's mixed." Ain't nobody got that back. However, conditions are different today, and that's where we look for. So first of all, it's a matter of like, and just not being black or not being perceived as black or not even just like proclaiming blackness. That changes the vibration when walking on the streets. And so again, it's like walking like an Indian. It's not a given whether the streets are going to respect that or are going to try to test that. And so that's where things are at this moment. Streets where I live at the moment have a certain knowledge about myself. I'm a piece of shit. I work with God, but because of that, even as however I'm perceived in terms of ethnicity, there's still a certain awareness of what's involved around myself. So the interesting thing is that historically, as I said, being mixed is often perceived by others as a liability. They don't have civil rights organizations at the ready on speed dial, ready to come through if things go down. They don't have professional organizations. They don't have professional lawyers groups. This, that, and the other. So like it's perceived as easy target, easy pickings. However, things done changed because mixed population is increasing significantly, and that changes the power dynamics of politics and otherwise, which is one of the things that fuels the animosity towards mixedness, because of that, again, the divide and conquer plantation mentality of fighting for scraps and perceiving like having a specific portion of scraps earmarked for one community and holding fast to that, not trying to let any of that go, and meanwhile trying to get over on the scraps of other communities. So the mixed community is increasingly numerous. Legit already the largest ethnic community in the United States, on this continent, even around the world. One of the largest ethnic communities. There's a lot of big ones. But then if we divide those big ethnic communities into subcategories of ethnic groups, that's a whole nother situation. So even without the formal infrastructure of institutions and otherwise, there's huge numbers. And many mixed kinfolk are in positions of influence. Many of those might be highly leveraged and otherwise, but still, there's still a matter of being in the know, and being connected and having some type of influence in cultivating public policy and law. So when people say, "Oh, yo, he's just mixed," but then it's a matter of like, wait, hold up, he might know somebody though, and so there might be a further slight pause than what would otherwise be. And the point is that mixed heritage is increasingly a plausible, um, and preferable and favorable identification, so that rather than a mixed person trying or being expected to assimilate within a black culture and just be accepted as like a lower status kind of thing. Now it's a matter of mixed heritage kinfolk establishing a unique and distinct cultural experience, and inviting others to join along those lines. So mixed heritage is increasingly viable, and increasingly organized. And again, there's duplicity, there's false fronts, and further indiscretions and lacks of discipline. But there is, starting to fall asleep again, obviously. Um, finish this thought. Finish it. Finish it. That was a big Immortal Kombat type thing. Street Fighter, somewhat so. Well, anyways, whatever I was just saying a minute ago was whilst I was half asleep. Just gonna leave it as it is. So, and I'm just gonna get off the black things. That's what I've been talking about for the past half hour at this point. And it was past 2 a.m. I started half an hour ago. The United States is dead. The United States is gone, and we don't say that to be provocative. We don't say that. Well, that might seem somewhat disgenuine because that's a very strong statement. But the intention is not to be just like sensational or otherwise, but just being very plain and candid, and have in discussion about the conditions that to optimize the well-being of all kinfolk of all kinds. So. The United States is dead, and it happens before Obama, and what kinfolk can like cite what might be recognized or perceived as that actuality of like when that actually happens, but again, just recognizing it happens before Obama. And what does it? The United States is dead mean? It means that it's a shell. It's the remains. It's gone as a construct, as a phenomenon, and now it's just people finding the remains of the United States and like propping that up and pulling strings accordingly. So so that's the actuality, and this is leading to a very necessary, very prudent question, and the question is this: for the U.S. citizens or the would-be citizens or the perceived citizens, without intending to be antagonistic or hostile or otherwise. This is for the purpose of constructive building and understanding and awakening. So the question is, I miss all that. Who do you want to protect and guard you? Or amidst the fall, after the fall, amidst the falling, the demolition of the United States, or the dissolution, I'll say dissolution of the United States. The question posing to the concentration is being challenged right now because of the fatigue, particularly. Who do you want to guard and protect you? Just again, recognizing the United States being gone. The United States is not the one for providing security, for providing guard and protection over anybody at this point. It's people who have taken over the remains of the United States and who are like abusing that to do these unhealthy policies and whatever else. So recognizing that the puppetry game is being primarily and significantly organized by people who do not value traditional family, and a lot of the other precepts that the blue collar American not just like celebrates and honors and emphasizes, but is willing to die for it. And that's not an invitation. That's not a solicitation or whatever else, but just recognizing like the significance. Um, and that the police officers are doing the best police officers can, but at the same time, because the law itself is corrupt, there's severe limitations about what the type of guarding and protection that police officers are able to do, particularly when responding to immediate fires on a daily basis. So again, the question is, who do you want to guard and protect you whilst the United States is dissolving? Is it the United Nations formally, UN peacekeeping troops to come in and protect women and children from being abducted and raped and experiencing other types of violence? Who do you want to guard and protect you? In a very practical sense. Is the United Nations, is it a coalition of other international governments, allies, like NATO or otherwise, that have a presence amidst the dissolution? Is it neighboring countries to provide similar types of support and security? Is it the police who are working for pedophiles and cannibals? And ain't no telling what may happen when relinquishing bodily integrity and otherwise to the custody of police. Who do you want to guard and protect you? It's bright. Do you want it to be the gangsters in the streets living by gangster laws? Do you want it to be the private security agencies employed by banks and otherwise to do some type of martial law type of enforcement? Just going along with the motions and turning a blind eye to the actualities that causes severe susceptibilities and vulnerabilities. Who do you want to guard and protect you? Is it another ethnic group? There's a purpose. There's a further purpose for answering this, and its purpose is through the examples that I'm sharing, but it's not in a articulate and a succinct way. So it may have to wait for another time because again, I'm observing my fatigue right now, in the dilution of concentration. So and the efficacy within the articulation. So we give all thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim, known by many names and beyond all names. Blessed love and peace, Rastafari.